So good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you everybody for joining in for this webinar here on Zoom and also on Facebook Live. So I'm here with Mr. Ajay Agarwal from the field of design, innovation, and design thinking. Uh, the best way to introduce him is that he has been uh, working at this intersection and building organizations and teams of different kinds, and that is where Harshit Desai from MIT ID, is in conversation with him to really understand how does design really contribute to business, and what are some of these new concepts that we all as students and working professionals should be aware of when it comes to integrating or relating design with business. So thank you, Ajay sir. Thanks for joining in. And I think just to kind of begin with, if you could just help us with your brief background and what has been your journey so far, that will help all of us understand and put things in the right place.
Sure. So thank you so much, Harshit, for the kind introduction. But I'll just introduce myself slightly differently. That's how I like to be known. So I'm a Haryanvi by birth, and then a consultant by choice, and an entrepreneur by heart.
Wow.
That's what I am, and that's what I do for a living. Now coming to what I have done. So basically, 15 plus years of industry experience across various industries and domains that I've served. My last assignment was with KPMG, wherein I had set up an entire design thinking practice and built up a team that was driving a business around design. And presently, I'm in the journey of again creating one more business, and that's the journey that I've just recently started, which is as old as 2 days back. So yeah, so I mean that's what my journey has been till now. And in my years in KPMG, worked with a lot of organizations in helping them use design into various kinds of business problems and business challenges, and launching solutions internally, externally, which kind of add value to the customers or to the users whom they are being designed for. So yeah, broadly, that's about me. And I think during the entire conversation, I'm going to share more of my experiences, what I have done, what I have gone through, what I have lived. And I think that's how you will know me more. So for people who have joined in, welcome once again. I think it's interesting to know that there are people who are really inquisitive or really wanting to know more about this space. So yeah, I mean, all excited to be a part of this.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Thanks for that very personalized introduction, and that's very important for us to really put forth that this is what we are at heart, and this is what we do for our work. So I think that really helps us understand also things in a better way. Uh, so there's a lot of not confusion, but usually design is perceived popularly in a different way, and the way currently business and industry is looking at design and how does it kind of contribute to an organization uh, is a different story. So how do you see this kind of thing getting resolved? Is the common people understand design in a different way, whereas when the design thinking and design method that we are talking about, are they really different, or are they same, or what's your view and what's your take on that?
So I completely understand what you're saying, and I think I have been facing this a lot with the organizations and with the people who I've worked with in my uh, career of in design, and in my career of design thinking and innovation. So I'll tell you what do I see design thinking as, and what is it all about, and I'll try and break this myth around. Um, I'm trying to break this myth around how do people perceive design and what is design thinking. So first of all, let me just try and establish for everyone on this forum that what according to me is design thinking. So design thinking, according to me, is a way that helps you think of any situation. So I mean, it not only it might not only be a product or a service or anything. It can be any situation. It helps you think from the eyes of or it helps you see from the eyes of the person who's going to use it, who's going to get impacted by it. And then once you understand that, you then try to put in design elements, or you put in elements into the solution which can add four-dimensional value to the customer or to the user or the person who's going to get impacted by it. Now, the person who might get impacted by it can be the government. The person who might get impacted by it can be the environment, can be anyone, the user, customer, anyone. So the four-dimensional value on how have I worked around it or how have I seen it in my life is any customer, anyone looks at four kinds of values that he wants to draw from the solution that we are trying to design. The first one is functional value, which is any problem, any functional features, any functional problem that he's trying to resolve. The second one is aesthetic, which is about look and feel, which is about the color, which is about everything else that we normally perceive design as. The third part is commercial, which is about is it fitting into my pocket? Is it fitting into what I look at or what I can pay for, what I can afford? And the fourth part, which is again the most important part, but a lot of times get ignored, is emotional, which is about what emotional value is my design bringing to the customers or to the users' life. Because I think a lot of us believe that we take decisions which are calculative, which are conscious, but research says 95% of decisions that humans make are emotional, are decisions that do not have logic behind it. But because they are emotional decisions, we go ahead with it. So if we are taking emotional decisions, if our customers are thinking emotionally and taking emotional decisions, our design should also encompass this. Now, this designs can be a process that you're designing. This design can be any product, anything that you're designing. But what we used to call it, or what we call it in our design in our world, is something known as the face of every design, which is functional, aesthetic, commercial, and emotional. So I think that's what is happening, and that's what design thinking brings on the table. So design had a I feel that design had a very narrow definition that it was being looked at before, and now with design thinking coming in, it's only expanding. So it's adding value to the overall area of design, and the application of design is getting expanded to various areas in businesses, various places, various domains that it's helping people solve problems or challenges that are being faced.
Okay.
So according to me, that's what design thinking per se is versus from what normally people perceive design as.
Oh. Great. So thanks again. It was very nicely put, and the four aspects that you mentioned, they are always very critical. And as you rightly pointed out, the most important is the emotional connect that somebody can develop with the solution. So could you just help us with an example to detail this out? Like how does maybe a case study or an example where design thinking was used to come up with a solution which was ticking all the four boxes?
I'll give you a recent one that we did. So this was again as a part of my previous role. So basically, we were working with an organization which is an e-commerce platform for senior citizens. So basically, what they do is they kind of sell products or sell services or anything that is kind of targeted towards senior citizens. Okay. Now we were working with them, and that's where I think I'll just share a beautiful example that we kind of looked at around design being applied into various facets of the business. So the first part where we tried to apply design was we first tried and understand. We tried to understand that who are the new senior consumers of India. Okay. And our target segment, our target audience was the urban senior consumers, to be very precise, that we wanted to look at urban senior consumers. Now, the first thing where we started using design was we first renamed the entire segment from senior citizens to senior consumers, saying that we are not looking at senior citizens at all. Because as soon as I say senior citizens, the first perception that comes to our mind is those vulnerable people who do not have money, who do not have anything, and then they're all dependent on others, right? So what we did was we first redefined the entire segment and said these are senior consumers. We are trying to understand what they need or what they are looking out for. And then, interestingly, when we did our empathy studies, or when we tried and we went on field and tried and observed what these new senior consumers of India are, we could figure out 4 types of senior consumers who we named as senior thrivers, then senior. So there were 4 segments that we created. I do not remember the exact name. So silver thrivers, silver vulnerables, and there were 2 more in between. So now, what interestingly we figured out was the thrivers are in fact more well-versed or more proactive in experimenting with new products, in experimenting with new experiences. They are looking out for personalized experiences, and they form almost 28% of the senior consumer market today. And when we looked at organizations, when we looked at people or organizations who are manufacturing or who are producing services, they do not even consider them as a segment in their entire portfolio of products and services. Okay. And then further, there were other segments. We further tried to look at the overall market sizing. And in fact, we ourselves were surprised. The overall market size of the urban senior consumers in India, we estimated it to be $250 billion. Oh. $250 billion. Now, this was the overall empathy part of it, wherein we tried and understood what are they looking at, what are their aspirations, what are certain things that will delight them. From there on, what we did was 3 key things that we wanted to do with the organization. One, we wanted to redesign their entire experience that they were delivering on the platform. That was one. Second, we gave them insights around what kind of products should they be enlisting. What are those that are different target segments or different target users from the senior consumer community are looking out for. The third key insight that came out was this entire drive of community within senior consumers. Because as and when you become old, the drive towards being together increases, right? Because you already feel lonely at your place and at wherever you live. Plus, a lot of senior consumers, urban senior consumers, their children have already moved out and they've settled abroad. So we figured that also out. So we designed an entire community engagement platform as well for them, saying that how can you engage these entire senior consumers across various regions by creating communities and helping them engage on those communities. So what I'm trying to give you here is a glimpse around how design thinking as an approach got applied into various facets. Products, we designed watches for senior consumers. So that was the product side of it. The entire platform, which was about the user experience, the processes behind it. An entire service, which was around community as a service that the organization started, and we had the organization kind of start and launch. So this is what design thinking brings in, right? If you look at it very narrowly, you will just say, okay, fine, we will do a product, we will do something around it, we will kind of make it more aesthetic, make it more functional and more. But I think the application is much larger. So that's what I feel. And plus what I also see is that more and more businesses are needing it now. The biggest reason behind it, at least I call it, and I'm sure a lot of you would have got exposed to this term known as VUCA. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? Ambiguous, so basically, the world around us, let's take an example for this as well. Okay. I mean, it's a very, very recent example that has happened. All of you are aware of COVID that is going around, right? Is COVID a standard graph curve? No, it is volatile. It's going up and down, up and down. The second wave is here. Sometimes the first wave reached its peak and then it was going down. That's volatility. Every business is going through that. Okay. Second piece that we talk about is uncertainty. Okay. Uncertainty around, do we know when it's going to end? Do we know what's going to happen next? No. Right. Uncertainty. Complex. Do we know how to handle the entire situation? There's so many people, so many things involved in the entire ecosystem. complexity is very, very high. And the fourth element that we look at is ambiguous, right? Do we even know what are the various facets that are getting impacted? We don't even know that. So, I mean, we don't have answers to a lot of questions. Most of the organizations, I'll tell you, March 22nd is when lockdown hit India, right? None of the organizations, a lot of people reached out to me as well, saying that, Ajay, why couldn't you, because you guys talk about design, because you talk about empathy, because you talk about all of this, why couldn't you guys predict, you guys predict COVID and these kind of things are going to happen? I said, design is not about predicting. We're not astrologers. Remember this. As designers, you're not as design thinkers, you're not astrologers. What you are is, or what you are enabled with is certain, I mean, I call it the mindset, skill set, and discipline. You are kind of enabled with these tools that can help you design for any kind of situation. So if there's a situation that is it, fine, it was not predicted, but can we do something about it today? Yes. So we rejigged a lot of business models. We helped our customers rejig a lot of delivery methods, a lot of ways that they could reach out to their own customers. So I think that's why I feel that, and this today it is COVID, tomorrow it might be something else, right? So I think because of this fast-paced VUCA that is happening around and will keep happening around, I think every organization is looking out for a new way. Because the old methods of saying that we have defined a process and this will work in the same way for the next 10 years doesn't go that way. I mean, I remember, I mean, and I give this analogy a lot, because in 2015, okay, when I used to work with organizations, everyone had a 2020 vision. Everyone had a 2020 vision. Right? And when I went to all these organizations, or some of these organizations, some of them are friends now, the leaders of those organizations, and I asked them that in your 2020 vision, was there a COVID anywhere factor? Said no.
Nobody.
So that's what is happening. That this VUCA is impacting organizations. It will keep impacting organizations. What they need is a new way which can help them react fast, design fast, and address the new challenges that are coming up fast. So I think that's what I feel is why design is becoming more and more important, or talk of the town for a lot of organizations, and its application is expanding.
Very interesting. I think examples really help it. It really helps us really put it down in that right bucket as to how is it working, and we can actually see that it's kind of working and helping us to come up with the right products and services. So you talked about empathy a lot, and as we know, it's one of the key defining aspects of the design thinking process. But could you just further elaborate on what, if I had to break down design thinking into say different stages or different phases of how does it get actually executed or implemented?
Sure. So if you ask me, design, again, design thinking per se has got three levels or three layers to it. Okay, that's how at least I see it. That's how I see it. The first layer is a mindset layer. Okay. Now that layer is for the individuals. Okay. So why is design becoming so important? Because it has something to offer at each level. There are various layers to it. At an individual layer, it offers a mindset. Now, what is that mindset that I'm talking about? The mindset of exploration. I'll kind of talk about it more in some time. So, mindset of exploration, mindset of experimentation, and mindset of evolution. Now, what do I mean by exploration? It's about no one will come and tell you that there is a problem. You will have to figure it out. That's one. That's exploration. Experimentation, no one is going to tell you what the answer is. You will have to find it. That's experimentation. And evolution, your designs are not going to be permanent. They will change, right? So I think that's the mindset. That's the first level for the individual. That's how I see it. I mean, this is something that I have been living all my life. And that's the reason, that's how I frame this entire principle or the first part of it. The second part, again, something that all of you should kind of remember is that while your mindset might be driven by design, but there are others in the periphery who cannot think design, or who are not right now nudged towards design, or who are not able to kind of think it naturally, right? So that's where you will need a common language, a language that everyone can talk and follow, right? And kind of reach to the destination that they are wanting to reach to. So that's where the process part of it comes in, and that's where the various ways that people have defined. Someone define it as EDPIT, which is empathy, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Someone like in KPMG, we designed our own framework, which was explore, ideate, create, evolve. Um, there are some people who have a 12-step thing. So I think a lot of process methods that are being talked about, but I feel there should be a common language to help scale. So that is the second piece that it offers to help scale. It is a common language that people can have. And I think the third element that we talk about is the whole element of design. Design inspires people. Okay, because there's such a high element of human centeredness into it, and such a high element of storytelling into it, that it starts inspiring people. And as soon as you're able to inspire people, like I say the word empathy, I think all of us connect with empathy, right? As a word, it's such a strong emotional feeling that you have when you try to understand someone else's emotions, right? So uh, it inspires people. Now, as soon as you're able to inspire people, you develop a culture that automatically starts exploring, experimenting, and evolving, which helps makes organizations timeless and boundaryless. So basically, if I look at it from a business periphery standpoint, I mean, that's the view that I'm taking. I mean, it has a lot of personal life learnings also for me. But let's take a business standpoint. It offers a mindset to the individuals. It offers a process to scale within the organization. And the third thing, it inspires people to develop into a culture slowly, which kind of makes the organization timeless and boundaryless. So I think that's what it is all about. I mean, if there's anything else that you're looking out from me from in this part of it, just let me know, because I see it that way. I can get into explaining empathy and all of that.
No,
but
no,
I
no, I
feel
think
this is more the overall frame of it. This is more valuable for the people who are wanting to get on this journey of design.
Sure. I think that was very useful, because as you rightly mentioned that every organization or there are different models to describe the design thinking process, but this leveling up it in different layers, I think that's a good kind of way to look at it, because then it becomes very relatable. I can relate it with my individual organization, and then at different layers also. So thank you for that, sir. Thanks. And there's surely a what I would say, the practice part now shows there that you are not following something like a checklist, but there is a lot of your own work and interpretation and analysis which has gone into it. So I think that is.
I'll give you one more example here. When I set up a entire business around design, okay, I think my first challenge was that how do I get the right people for it? Now and while I said that I want to get the right people, there was no way for me to define what is right
Okay.
in the entire thing.
Yeah.
Right. So I think then my approach was that, or the approach that I took was that getting the right mindset. That was my approach. Saying that if a mindset is towards if a person is ready to experiment, a person is ready to and I mean I had different ways to kind of I never had a normal way of evaluating the mindset of people. There was no tool that I ever used. I firmly believe that the only way that you can understand all of this is by making them do it. So you do it, you show it, and then we'll be able to figure it out. Okay. So what I focused on was getting the right mindset. And then I think the next level of challenge, once I had a strength of 10, 12 people to start with, the next challenge was for me, the common language was easier, because I think a simple or a workshop or something that you go through as a formal education. A lot of them, or some of them, had that formal education already. So I think the common language was the less difficult part, but the more difficult part was the culture part of it. How do I bring in this entire culture of saying that people are not scared? First of all, people are not scared of opening up and giving an honest point of view. Second, uh, how do we respect those point of views and try and see if we can bring something out of it? Even if we fail, doesn't matter. But at least it brings trust into people that we are not punishing people for the failures that they have gone through. Remember, guys, I think there is no way, even if you use design or any other way, no way that can tell you that you will always succeed. So if you're looking that design is the capsule that you will eat and it will make you succeed always, doesn't happen. You are going to fail. I have failed multiple times. My first startup that I said that I'm an entrepreneur by heart, right? My first startup that I did, which was right after my graduation, it failed, and it failed badly. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to try again, right? So I think that was my biggest challenge. It took me almost 2 years in a small team. Also, it took me 2 years for people to believe that guys, we can experiment here. We can try new things here. Even if we are failing, it's fine. But obviously, there was a shadow that I created of revenue, saying that there's a constant cash cow that we have. There's a constant revenue that we are getting. So you don't get questioned on the experiments that you're making. And under that, you're doing a lot of experiments. We launched, to tell you, we launched in 1.5 years. We launched 7 new solutions into the market, and it was all from the team, right? So I think that's the whole that's the difficult part of it, but that's the fun part of it also, is what I feel.
Okay, great. And thank you for bringing this up, because the next question that I was going to ask you was about this whole thing about the startups and starting up and all of that, what we see around us. So design thinking, the way it applies in a, say, a bigger organization vis-a-vis it would apply in a startup context, or maybe at an early stage of any idea. How does it vary, or some things remain common, and how does one go about applying these things?
So I think let me tell you first that the day you have decided that you are going to start, you've already started thinking design.
Oh,
let me tell you, right?
Wow.
The day you've started, you thought the day you started thinking that I'm going to start up something. Okay? Because without design, in some shape and form, I'll come to the nitty-gritties of it shortly, but in some shape or of it, without a design mindset, without being able to figure out that there's an opportunity somewhere, without being able to figure out that for this opportunity, I need to put something together, without being able to figure out that what is that first MVP or the minimum viable product that we call it, what is that first thing that I need to put into the market? Because I'm sure as startup, I have gone it thrice. One on my own startup, which failed. The second one was with KPMG, which I just recently finished my stint at. And the third one that I'm in right now. I'm sure all of us will be having constraints in terms of money, time, resources. All constraints apply when you start, right? So figuring out that what is that minimum that I need to put into the market, I think you already started thinking design. That's one.
Okay.
Right. So that's the first aspect of it. Now coming to the nitty-gritties of it. I think as a startup or as someone who is applying design at a very early stage, you should apply. I always recommend that whether you are in any phase of your journey, you should apply design, because design for me is now become a way of life. I mean, at my home also, I think design. I mean, at my home also, when I talk to my kids, I try and understand what is their perspective around things. When I talk to my wife, I try and understand that. I live in a joint family, and to survive in a joint family of 10 people staying together under one roof, I think you need to empathize with people, because without that, with so many with 3 generations staying together, it becomes difficult, right? So I think when you're starting up, it's not about the process too much. it's not about the various tools that you have. You should have them. If you've gone through a formal education or you're attending something, it helps you think in a particular direction. But I think during a startup stage, what is more important is the mindset. And I think that's something that you've already started doing once you started thinking of a startup. And if you've not done that, if you're just trying to copy someone else, I think there also you can try and innovate. Basically, if I mean, that's another way of starting a wherein there's already a product which is suboptimal, or it's kind of not addressing all the needs of the entire market, and you adding some certain features. So I think there also you can apply. But again, at that level, more of the mindset works. Then I think when you scale into a team of 8 to 10 people, I think that's the initial scale that happens. That's where you might want to introduce some common language. And then kind of when you scale up into a team of around 40, 50, then you should start thinking of it on how do I bring this culture within the entire organization. So I think that's what I think as a journey of a person who's starting up and who's looking out to apply design. This is how it varies. Principles remain same. It's ultimately about figuring out an opportunity with some people, some challenges that someone is going through, experimenting and finding the answer, and then evolving it into multiple iterations and looking at how would the new solution kind of evolve to become from an MVP to a full-fledged scaled solution later.
Okay, great. That's very insightful, and I think you know it best because you have been in all the stages at all levels. So I think we will take this as a very strong piece of advice. So one question on like behalf of the audience, and then I will actually open it for the audience to ask. Youngsters, and especially at a early stage of career, at least in the institute also, I always find this dilemma among the students that whether they should go with a kind of a placements and go into a big company or start something of their own. In general, it's a kind of a career decision. Earlier, when the startup ecosystem and there wasn't so much of startup activity anyways happening around us, then probably it was a very linear career that, okay, means after doing, it's a pretty set path. But now, as there's so much more avenues and so much opportunities in the startup world, I at times feel that there is always a dilemma because many students, they have a lot of their own ideas that they want to work on, but probably they are not able to make up their mind. They may not find it confident enough or ready enough that, okay, I want to plunge and start something. So how does one choose this? I know it's a difficult question, but generally because you've seen both the worlds, right? You've seen how startups work and how bigger companies work. What is it for a young professional to kind of start career in today's time?
Sure. So at heart, if you ask me, startup.
Okay.
That's what I feel, because I think you guys already have the right tools, right things, that right mindset that you have already learned coming out of a design school. You've learned the soft as well as the hard skills around it. So I think that's by heart. If you ask me, a clear answer. But I think a lot depends on the other conditions that you have around you. You might have financial situations that are not because startup is not an easy journey, guys. Remember, it is not an easy journey. You might see the various unicorns that are getting created and the kind of visibility all of them are getting. But remember, I think a lot of them are still burning investor money. Okay. And burning investor money is while they're burning it, but there's a lot of pressure that they also go through. So it's not an easy journey to go through, but I think it's a very fulfilling journey to have. Okay. What happens in the end? That's a separate this thing, because when I had my first startup, which was almost 12 years ago, I think the ecosystem was, not even there.
Yeah.
And more than the ecosystem, the bigger challenge was of this entire what do you say, of failure. I mean, this entire taboo of failure, right? Yeah. And in my community, I mean, I belong to an Agarwal community. I mean, I don't know how many of you are aware of Agarwal as a community. Agarwal is basically a business community.
Yeah.
In this thing, you fail into examination, doesn't matter. You fail into anything else, doesn't matter. But you fail into business, I think that is the worst that you can ever. And I think that's where I started from, right? My first business was a failure, right? So I think now the ecosystem is much better. There's acceptance as well. Even if you are starting up and you fail there are organizations who still respect that and they hire you. So that's one. So I think that's the good side of starting. It's a fulfilling journey. There's a tough side as well, which is you will feel constrained from all sides. But I think if you have that mindset, you will find our co-conspirators in our design schools or these schools. Find your co-conspirators there only. You will have your co-founders there. You will have some people who voice it out. They're not able to clearly say that because of some fear or some phobia that they have towards it. So I think if you are nudged towards starting up, I think give them some motivation, give them that, and it's not only as students but as faculty as well. Give them that motivation, give them that initial hand. See, guys, nothing would happen. Get through it. When I was going through, when I took this decision of going on my own once again, which is through Humane Design that we have launched just 2 days back. I think the first thing that I did was I called up one of my faculties. Okay, and I said, sir, this is what I'm planning to do. He told me only one thing, that Ajay, if you feel for it, and I knew it from your days of education that you will start up someday. And I also knew that you've already failed once again. So I think if you have thought on it, go ahead. You already have brands behind you. You already have a very good customer base behind you. You already have credentials behind you. If, God forbid, something happens, job, you will always get a job. Naukri to mil jayegi. Do paise kam ki mil jayegi. You will get a job which is maybe slightly less paying, but you will get a job, right? So I think that's my first preference. But coming to, if you are under financial constraints, now I think the ecosystem of design is getting matured or slightly becoming more exciting in large corporates as well. Okay. And which are non-design corporates. So initially, I think a lot of design options were available in design studios.
Yeah.
You may have Frog, you may have any other these design studios. There were a lot of career options available there. But now I think KPMG has a full-fledged design team. Deloitte has it, McKinsey has it, BCG has it, a lot of Infosys has it, so TCS has it. So not a lot of these non-core design firms have started this entire thing around design that they're trying to drive. And it purely happened because of the application getting expanded. That's what I've been talking about, that the application of design is getting expanded. That's the reason these organizations are getting it. So what you can think of is, not only if startups is not an option for you, if the design studios is not an option for you, you have the other corporates as well who are slowly maturing up into design person. But remember, it's still growing. It's still kind of taking shape. If you see, and that's what I always say, that as of now, if you design thinking per se will not have a lot of jobs. Only design thinking. So you think that I'm looking out for a design thinking guy. It won't have a job. I'm looking for, so like Agile has some jobs right now. If you're an Agile expert, people hire Agile experts, right? But design right now, it's not got that mature, but it is slowly reaching there. So what I always suggest is that have your core. Suppose you have done your graduation in engineering, or you've done your engineering in mechanical, or in software, or you've done your graduation in law, or you've done your graduation in commerce, or you've done your graduation in any space. What I always say is, combine that graduation learnings that you have with design thinking, create a unique proposition for yourself. Think that I am a guy who can think design in commerce, in business, in finance. That's a unique space that you bring in. So now when you go to an organization, you are going in for a completely different pitch that you go in for, especially the corporates, because they're not hiring for core design skills. You go with a completely different proposition that you go there, that I can think design in finance, because that's what I bring together. I can think design in engineering. I can think design in IT. I can think design in law. And that's what becomes a very, very strong proposition. And then I say it's your duty that once you get into these organizations, create space for more.
Yeah.
I think that's how we bring in an entire movement into place. That if you have, suppose some of you get educated on design and you're able to create this entire proposition, that's what I've been doing. I have been trying to create space for more design thinking guys coming in into the entire business ecosystem. Because I think, yes, Sachi, we will take your question, but and that's your duty then. That once you get through it, create space for more. I think that is what will create this entire larger ecosystem for designers and design thinkers in the industry overall.
Great, great. Thank you, sir. It was really inspiring and good that I asked that question, because this is that clarity that we as institute and the faculty also need, and then good that it got kind of transferred to the students who are listening to this. So thank you, sir, for that. Yeah, Sachi, you had a question. I'll open this for the audience in case you have any more questions. You can ask here or maybe reach out to me later, and I can get it answered by sir. Because the time is limited now. But Sachi, you can go ahead and ask what is.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. All right. So, sir, I had a question about the empathy factor that you told us about. So, when we talk about design thinking and empathy is a very important factor there, and so that makes one of the key elements of design thinking the fact that design should be very human centered, right? So, what I personally still find difficult is how to communicate to who we are designing for effectively, because all we can think of are surveys and questionnaires and Google forms, like who the customers that like the target audience that we are designing for, how to communicate to them effectively so we can come forth with a a well researched and an efficient and an effective output.
Sure. Thanks, Sachi, for asking this. I think that's what I think Harshit was trying to ask when he talked about empathy. But good, you kind of delve deeper into it. So I'll just share some of my experiences, Sachi. So first of all, at least if you ask me, we do surveys. We do some bit of surveys as well. We do some bit of questionnaires as well. We do all of that. But I think the first rule that I follow in whenever we are doing an empathy phase of any kind of design project is saying that we will not stop at them. We will not stop at surveys. We will not stop at questionnaires or any kind of secondary research or any kind of non-communicative primary research. Okay. So I'll come to your question as well, but let me just first kind of define how do we do this. So we in our kind of environment, we had defined a 3-step approach to empathy also, which was about observe, engage, and immerse. Okay, OEI is how we defined it as. Now, when we talk about this entire thing, it has it has an element. I think it's a greater element of that presence. Physical presence or virtual presence, but being there in the entire space and environment. I think that's the first point. A lot of research that happens, I think a lot of companies still make that mistake that we think that empathy is all about survey bhara liya, questionnaire done. I think then the empathy phase is done. We bring out certain insights. But I think most of the times what you get out of the surveys versus when you go on the field and you actually see it, they are very different from each other. That's one. Now, coming to your point of how do we communicate when we go to these people, how do we communicate with them? I'll give you an example. I'll take the same example that I just narrated at the start of it, which Harshit asked me, which was about the senior consumers. Okay. Now, when we did the senior consumer research, or when we did the empathy studies for senior consumers, we met 200 plus senior consumers across 6 cities in India, urban cities. Okay, we covered the major metros and we covered the tier 1 or tier 2 cities as well. Now we actually traveled, this was pre-COVID time, we actually traveled and we met people there. Now, the first thing, the biggest inhibition that we had within us, okay, was that would they be okay to meet us? What would they go and when we go there, what would they tell us? Would they be okay to open up? Would they be would they not throw us away if we enter their homes? Because we spent at least I remember I personally had visited 12. I did 12 such interventions with respect to the empathy conversations or empathy observations or OEI that we talk about. I had gone to people's homes and I was there for at least 2 to 3 hours. Now, so the first barrier to break before we actually get into communicating was breaking that inner inhibition of going and meeting strangers. And that's the first barrier, okay? Because you all go through it, that we go to a stranger, how will we introduce? How will he even entertain us? He will throw us out. In fact, it was the biggest surprise for me that I went to people's homes, not everyone, but there were a few of them who served. And I set the context very, very clearly that we are doing this kind of work. They served food to me. There were people who said that my child, he left me and went to the US. He's working for another Big Four. And I'm going to proudly tell him that there's another Big Four who values us, who has come here. You don't value us, but there's other people from other Big Fours who have come and interviewed us. They clicked photos with us and they shared. They talked about how they are driving a lot of travel experience through communities. They have these small communities that they have created, and every year they make a travel plan to some abroad country, and they go together there with all the food and everything. So they talk to these travel agencies to customize an entire plan for them. So, I mean, I'm just sharing some experiences. So that is one, breaking your internal inhibition of first feeling that people will not entertain. People do entertain. And if some people don't, doesn't matter, just walk up to the next person. You will figure out a way. The second part of it on how did we communicate? The best tool, so two things that we kind of always practice. The best one is having, we crafted an entire story around what is the purpose that we are wanting to drive through this entire engagement. Okay, so we crafted an entire purpose story. So for that, I think just read a bit more around stories on how stories are being crafted, how purpose stories are crafted. So we had a purpose story which was standard across all the people who were doing the research. And we had said that while there's a standard story that we have, but if you feel that you need to customize it in some sense or some way, because I'll tell you, we went to Delhi and there we wanted to meet, we had fixed up some appointments with a few senior citizens at their homes, or senior consumers at their homes. But one of them said that I can't meet you at home. I go to the garden daily in the morning at around 7 o'clock, and you can come there. Now we went there. What we saw was there was not one senior consumer. There were at least 20 of them. So in Delhi, you have these sectors, and within sectors, you have these small parks that are there in each sector. So we had to change the entire story, but the purpose remains same. That's the first part. The second part that I feel that whenever you are trying to do this kind of an engagement of communication, try and carry some physical elements with you. Try and carry some elements that they can interact with. Some activities that they can do, some activities or something physical that they can interact with. I'll tell you, we carried some games along with us, which were senior consumer games. And in the end of it, we gifted a few games to them, because I mean, it was not because that we wanted to actually, but we felt that they actually contributed, so we actually gifted it to them, saying that's I think you liked it, so you keep it. That's fine. We will look at something else. So I think what I'm trying to say is that what is more important is breaking the internal inhibition, crafting purpose stories to help people open up. Third is carry something physical to interact. And fourth is have your own style of interacting. While all of this is there, I'll give you one more example with respect to empathy. Sorry, this was with the insurance company that we were working with. And the challenge that we were trying to solve for them was the challenge that was thrown on them. And again, this will give you an interesting application of design which was designing a simpler, smarter, faster organization. Now think of it. What does this mean? If I ask any one of you that what does simpler, smarter, faster mean in an organization context, we went through the same thing. These are the kind of questions that come up. So my first thing that I wanted to do was that I wanted to understand from the person who had put this challenge up or put this entire thing up that we want to design this. So he was the MD of the organization. I was doing the research then, and I went to the MD to do his interview or to kind of understand from him what is that he has in mind when he says this. What is that he's looking out for? What are his needs? Why is he driving all of this? So I'll tell you the actual scenario that happened. Okay, I enter into the room, and he's the MD of an organization. He looks at his watch, and this is how he says, Ajay, I have only 15 minutes for you, 1-5. Okay, ask whatever you want to ask, and then we are done. You enter into a room of an MD, you are as it is a bit nervous. I was nervous at that point in time. You are as it is a bit nervous, and that's the first statement that he throws at you. I sat down there, and my first question to him was, and this is what I'm trying to tell you about, have your own style. My first question to him was not about what context, why am I here, all of it. I said, Sharda ji kahan se ho? His name was some Sharda. So I said, Sharda ji kahan se ho? That was my first statement. And he said, I said, Rajasthan se ho? नहीं Punjab se. When मेरा एक batchmate था, वो भी Sharda था. He was also a Sharda, and he was from Rajasthan. And he said, we are also from Rajasthan, but my ancestors shifted to Punjab, and that's how now. Great, your job is done. Then conversation started, and after that, in between, he had to go to the loo. So he said, Ajay, I want to go to the loo. I said, sir, you gave me 15 minutes, and you go to the loo. You're going to waste my 5 minutes there. What happens to that? He said, for every minute that I spend in the loo, I'll give you 5 more minutes extra. I said, go and spend 10 minutes and come back. He spent 50 minutes with me, Sachi. And this is the exact time that I had noted. He spent 50 minutes with me, and I got a lot of insights from him, which kind of then became a lot of design principles for our, there were a lot of other studies that we did, but they formed some of our design principles into our solution. I think this is what I feel that there's no single way to do it, but these are the 4 principles that I use a lot in different permutation combinations.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, this is really insightful, and I think this is the whole beauty of this kind of work, where you are there in the field, and you have every new project and every new day is a new learning experience, and I think that's what makes things so exciting. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for this very insightful and kind of peppered with this anecdotes, and I think in every answer that you gave, you followed the format of 4. Every time there were something which was in a bunch of 4 that you shared. So I think it's good if we can just make a good kind of a structure or a graphic out of it. It would be very interesting to see that the way there was a documentary of the powers of 10. Here we are saying that, okay, the powers of 4.
That's an interesting observation.
No, I was just looking every answer. I think I could see that there is always this bunch of 4 that you have shared. So I don't know, it's a coincidence or it's by design. Cool. Yeah, so Prayag also has a same validation that clients always use qualitative words to describe a problem, and then that empathy parts come to unravel.
Guys, but just one thing, I think we're almost up with time, but just one thing that I want to tell all of you.
Yes, sir.
I think it's a beautiful journey. It's a very fulfilling journey. If you're considering to get into this space, do get into this space. What you do, where you do, I think I leave it to all of you to take a decision. But I think it's a beautiful journey. I have loved this entire journey. But if you get into the journey, then I think take the responsibility of creating space for more. Create space for more. And that's when you will have a movement around this entire thing of design and design thinking. So it will not get spoken in only small forums. You will have large communities driving this entire thing. So if you're wanting to get in the journey, it's an exciting one. Take it to me. Whether you go through a startup route or an employment route, that's a choice that you can make. But do take this journey, and it's an experience in itself.
Okay, so thanks a lot for your insights, and I think because a lot of them, they are still wanting to ask or kind of to probably.
I mean, if there is a question or two from the audience, I can take 1 or 2 questions max, and then because 4:15 is when I have to have another call that I've scheduled.
No. So, we'll close it, sir. I think what we'll do is I'll anyways reach out to them and compile it separately, and then maybe get it across to them. And since we are in the digital world, who knows, we might have a follow-up session also where we do a deep dive, because everybody wants to go deeper into, say, just one topic at one go. So maybe we can do some other series also in coming times. Then.
Absolutely. Happy to do that.
Yes.
And all the best to all your journeys in the audience. And thank you, MIT, for inviting me to do this.
Sure. The pleasure is, so the pleasure is ours, and wish you also again best of luck for your steps ahead, and we hope to collaborate with you soon on other fronts as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. Bye.